everyone. My name is Rochelle Innocent and I'm the founder and CEO of Project Purpose. Welcome to our channel. Our community is focused on fostering the intellectual and character development in children. We do this through our parent-child workshops that are focused on 4 themes: autonomy, self-efficacy, compassion, and self-concept, in order to cultivate grit, perseverance, and resilience in each child. And we are so thrilled to be offering one of the first of its kind digital, virtual, and continuous learning environments, enabling parents and children to connect from all around the world. At Project Purpose, our overarching mandate is to renew and rebuild family, community, and relationships. Our different social media platforms provide us with an opportunity to have discussions and to create space on all topics that relate to family, community, and relationships with ourselves as well as with others, with a primary focus on mental health and education. More precisely, the ways that the institutions of mental health and education play a role and have played a role in our societies at large. These discussions and debates provide us with an opportunity to think critically about what needs to change within these structures for us to live up to our bold slogan, support, protect, and empower each child through youth-focused development, better known as leadership in juvenescence. We recognize that in valuing our children's leadership potential, this also translates as recreating and co-creating environments, both socially and politically, that will enable our children to thrive. For those of you who are particularly keen on the topic, we also write thought pieces every other Sunday. We are dropping a thought piece this upcoming Sunday, so be sure to meander over to the website and check out our online content. Now, if it is the case that you are looking for a listening alternative, well, we're available wherever podcasts are playing. We've provided you with access to a few links down below. Now, as is the convention, be sure to subscribe, hit that post notification bell so that you are aware of every time we post. And of course, if you like these conversations and you want to keep them going, like, comment, and share this segment. Let's get into it. Hello les mecs. Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another segment here on Project Purpose. For those of you who are new, we cover topics that relate to mental health, mental wellness, and education on a week-by-week basis, and today's topic of discussion is mental health. On the topic of mental health, I'm going to be talking about knowing your limits and playing within it, and this is of course, I think the Ontario Lottery Gambling Association, I think that's their mantra. That's where I got it from, but I think it works so well when it comes to mental health. And so this is really a conversation about how we recognize what our limits are, and then how we give ourselves boundaries, a bit of structure around how we make ourselves available to those around us so that we're never in a position where we're hurting ourselves, where we're never overextending ourselves. And so this is a very interesting topic for me because I believe everything is mind over matter. So I don't necessarily operate with the belief that there are limitations that kind of encase me. I do believe that the limitations are just an indication of like my present state, or an indication of where I am currently by way of my way of thinking, by way of my understanding, by way of my proficiency, my competency. But I've always believed that limits are flexible, that limits are fluid. If we're not talking about defying like universal laws, I think that when it comes to the topics that we're talking about, which are the limits that can really hurt our mental health, I'm really talking about respecting the constraint that you feel, the resistance that you feel, enough so that you can navigate pushing through that resistance. And so because I believe in mind over matter, because I believe that with training, with focus, with concentration, with intention, that we can push through limits. This isn't a conversation about respecting limitations, it's about recognizing them and then building yourself a plan to get through them, because I think that we can do everything and anything that we feel is an important investment of our time and our energies. And so that's really what this conversation is going to be about. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on different areas. So one of the areas, it has to do with proficiency. So I think when it comes to the areas where we feel really confident, where we feel like we're an expert in those areas, that was a process. You weren't born an expert in that area. You just might be so deep in your expertise that you don't remember the moments where you were a novice, where you didn't know as well. And so anytime I'm entering a new environment, whether it's professional, whether it's personal, where I'm taking stock of my current proficiencies and my current competencies, I'm putting on this wonderful, beautiful hat of novice. And I'm putting on that hat with intention, because I put on that hat and I tell myself to not be frustrated, not be intimidated, and not feel overwhelmed by all of the areas that I feel myself lacking. So that could be terminology, because it's not like my language. I'm not working in my native language, or I'm not working in an environment where I'm familiar with the domain-specific language. I have to learn the domain so that I can speak the language of the industry that I'm in. And when you work in consulting, you quickly learn to navigate the terminology that is very specific to sometimes the industry, but also specific to that company. And because I've worked in many different environments, I've become very fluid and flexible in the language that is used, because the language that is used, whether it's English or French, whether it's just the language that is specific to that company or the domain-specific language within that industry, it is a learning curve. And it's a learning curve I've always embraced, but I embrace it by first putting on my novice hat. And I put on this novice hat even when I'm walking in an area where I have expertise, where I have competency. If it's new, if it's not new, I am much more forgiving with myself. I am much more patient and accommodating to the learning curve when I have the novice hat on. So I'm looking at everything with bright new eyes. I am absorbing everything, even the things that I know that I've learned before. I want to absorb everything as if it's new, because then I absorb the nuance that comes with that new setting. And I think that when we walk into environments with this confidence of our expertise and what it is that we bring and the value that we bring, we also walk in with the limitations that those standards are built within, right? So anytime you're operating from a place of confidence, from a place of assuredness, just recognize that confidence and that assuredness have conditions to it. And so because I recognize that my confidence, my competence is really based on very specific experiences, and it can create blind spots, and it has created blind spots for me in the past when I have walked into an environment or looked at an exercise, or tried to start some research with a lot of confidence that my experience is going to help me. What ends up happening is my experience creates a bias that often blinds me from the problem at hand. I'm too busy picking up from experience or picking up from what relates to what it is that I'm looking at for that experience to be helpful. It ends up hindering me. So when I walk into a new setting with the eyes of novelty, with the lens of novelty, that I'm asking the right questions, I'm in the right state of mind, and I'm not operating from a place, unfortunately, of arrogance. Because sometimes when I am very confident, when I'm very sure of myself, those blind spots don't feel so blind in that point in time, and I'm like very sure that I know everything that's going on. I have like a 360 view, and you just can't feel that confident about a new setting and about how your experience and your transferable skills really relate. So regardless of the experience that I have, pretty much is the nut and bolts of this conversation. Any new setting, any new acquaintance, any new relationship, I'm approaching it with the lens of novelty. It will help me push through whatever limitations that confidence has been built in. Another area where limitations are flexible, and rather than work within those limitations, we can push through them, is with relationships. And with every relationship, there are going to be complexities that you come across, and you're going to come across different, I think, scenarios that make you wonder, am I built for this? And so I know what I'm built for based on what I have experienced in the past. But I think when it comes to new relationships, there's going to be different scenarios and contexts and situations where you feel like you're operating with two left feet, where you recognize to what extent like you just don't have those muscles in place. But because I believe mind over matter, then I recognize that the limitations that I'm experiencing, so the discomfort and the resistance that comes with discomfort, the unsettledness, the feeling of anxiety that comes when I'm like way outside of my comfort zone, especially when I think you've had kind of like a carbon copy template of what you expect in certain settings, or with different people, or with specific titles that you assign to different people. And when it's completely different, when there's nothing similar about what you're experiencing now, then that confidence or that assuredness can be a stumbling block. And it has always been. Anytime I have been confident walking into something new, whether it's a career, whether it's a relationship, that confidence trips me up, because no relationship can be comparable. No relationship are the same. We're two completely different people. And I often, by the time I get into a new relationship, because I take time to heal and grow and evolve between relationships, I'm not even operating and navigating the ways that I typically, or the ways that I had in the past. So when I am faced with what I feel to be my current limitations, I recognize that I'm operating, and that in order for me to show up in a specific relationship, that I need to develop muscles that I just don't have. Then rather than feel completely defeated or allow myself to stay in that sense of defeat, what I'm going to do is navigate that defeat and figure out what muscles, what competencies do I need to build. Because if I'm being requested by the universe to build them now, they're probably going to be useful for me in the future. So if I'm feeling a little bit lost and a little bit unsure of how I position myself to approach this limitation, because again, limitations for me are not indicators of stopping. They're an opportunity for me to grow past and grow through them, right? So anytime I experience that resistance, I recognize it for what it is. I give myself an opportunity to feel the feelings that resistance creates, but then my focus, like my mental, is about breaking through that limitation. Like I just don't have a threshold for limitations whatsoever. So like I need to recognize the signals that my emotions are bringing up so that I'm operating from a place where I'm honoring myself. I'm not disregarding all of the signals and what's happening within my body. And I'm taking all of those signals into account as I figure out, well, what's the way that I want to position myself in this moving forward? Like how do I want this frame to operate, to work moving forward based on my natural disposition? Because I'm not trying to change my natural disposition. I just want my disposition to be more flexible and more malleable to what the environment is presenting around me. So it's just important to know thyself, to take that time to introspect, to seek clarity for why you're experiencing the emotions that you're experiencing when you're in a new relationship and building and establishing a dynamic, and when you're dealing with complexities and difficulties and challenges that you feel are surmountable and that you feel that you can push through, but you need to grow through them to push through them. Then I think that is really about figuring out, well, what would healthy look like on the other side of this limitation? Like, how do I want to operate? What are some of the rules of engagement? What are some of the conditions on the other side of this limitation? Because I most certainly will get through it. And so another area where limitations for me are a challenge, they're a challenge and an opportunity to grow, is really with goals. And I am now in the thick of my thinking around my goals for next year. And a lot of my goals for this year are a continuation into next year, but also there are moments of reflection for me, right? Because next year is a completely new context, a completely new dimension, I think, for me, because by next year, I think that a lot of what it is that I have been planning for the last 5 years is going to start coming into fruition. So it was like 5 years of focusing my time and my attention in specific areas while dealing with a lot of chaos that is now settling. And I have to think to myself, well, wow, like how do I make sure that I maximize my energy accordingly across these very significant buckets that I spent the last 5 years building the foundations of, right? I did a life workshop in 2019, like early 2019, where I identified the quadrants where I wanted my time and energy to go into. And it's funny because now we are entering 2024 and I'm recognizing to what extent my reality has really transformed to reflect those quadrants. And I spent so much time, so much deep thinking, so much energy and emotion in really visualizing these quadrants. And through tears, through struggles, through challenges, through loss, through grief, through trauma, through stress, I have had these 4 quadrants in mind. So now I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, they're materializing. So I think the last 5 years has been an opportunity to grow, to learn, to shift and change so that I can carry the quadrants, carry these priorities and these areas that I have identified as so important to me properly. But I also need to now like develop the acumen, right? Because I've been developing maybe the character, I've been developing the mental frame, but I now need to develop the nuts and bolts, right? The detail, the specificities. I now need to give myself the opportunity to be open as those opportunities materialize. And I think that that kind of limitation is so intangible. It's just so much self-awareness, right? Because you don't know like what people, what opportunities, what experiences, what circumstances are presented in a way that, you know, you don't recognize that this is really what you wanted. This is the vision that you built, 5 years ago, but it never looks exactly the way that you envisioned it. And so like with me, I've learned to respect that. Like when I do finally achieve the goal that I have in mind, it never looks like what I had in mind, but it's always a reflection of it. And that's just such a weird dichotomy to have something be so specific to what it was that you envisioned, but look nothing like the vision whatsoever. Like you worked so hard on building this vision, you had it in sight, in mind, and you can somehow recognize it despite the fact that it's different from what you visualize in your mind. You recognize it because it still carries the core traits, right? And they're not traits that you experience with your sensory percepts or traits that you experience with like the essence of what it is you're hoping to attain. So I think that when you finally reach a place where you're starting to see that, it's like a big magnanimous moment. It is a moment of deep gratitude, of deep like reflection and deep just stillness, right? Because I'm like, wow, like this worked, like this happened, I built this. It's not magic, it was work, it was a lot of hard work, it was a lot of intention, it's a lot of mindfulness. So now that it's in front of me, I don't want to waste it. I don't want to take it for granted. I don't want to take advantage of it. And I want to push through whatever limitations might currently exist that would create that in consideration, because I always want to be considerate of the things that I have invited and spent time to invite and spent time building foundations and space to have translate in my life. So these are the areas where limits, I believe, limitations are challenges. They're invitations to grow. They're invitations to evolve, to pivot, to adapt, to move, and to expand. And who doesn't want to spend time expanding in this beautiful, wonderful human experience? So I wanted to come here and talk about that, talk about the limitations. When we say like know your limits, play within it, I'm pretty sure you all thought I was going to talk about respecting those limitations, putting boundaries and fortresses around those limitations, but it's the opposite. It's really about recognizing your limitations, understanding them, understanding why they exist so that you can push right through them, blow them out of the water. So in any case, that was it. Challenge for all of you as you think about your goals and reflect on how you want to show up for the next year, but definitely not all. Now, before letting you go, I would be remiss if I didn't let you know that we will be going live at least twice a month, every month for the foreseeable future on our Facebook page, so definitely be sure to tune in. Now, these events are paid events, so if you do see yourself participating in our community on an ongoing basis, then I do suggest that you take a look at one of our package plans. Yes, so we do offer package plans over and above our live events, as well as access to webinars and workshops largely focused on self-mastery over and above those events. So check it out, be part of our game changer community, being part of the change that you want to see, allowing us a small role to play in your journey. We are on the road to 1K, so we do invite you to follow us across all of our social media platforms, and we look forward to chatting with all of you very soon. We'll talk to you later.